Disclaimer: this content is only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. It started with a quiet evening, the kind where the world outside feels too loud, but the silence between two people says everything. She was sitting at the edge of the bed, brushing her hair, lost in her own thoughts. He stood at the door, just watching her. Not with desire, not with expectation, just a simple longing. A need for closeness. For a hug. But sometimes, a hug isn't just a hug. And sometimes, the space between two people isn't physical, it's emotional. They had been married for 5 years. Comfortable, yes. Happy. Most days. But lately, life had crept in between them. Work. Stress. The small things that pile up and make the warmth fade a little. He missed her, not just her presence, but her energy, her affection, the way she used to lean into him without thinking. Tonight, he just wanted to hold her. No words. Just a hug to say, "I'm still here." As he walked over and gently placed his hand on her shoulder, something changed in the air. She paused. Not because she didn't want the touch, but because she hadn't expected it. It had been a while since he reached out like that, not with pressure, but with patience. His touch wasn't forceful, but it carried more weight than he realized. More emotion. More need. She looked up at him, and in that moment, there was a pause, like time took a breath. Was it just a hug he wanted? Or was it something deeper he couldn't say out loud? This is a story about love that matures, not fades. About how physical touch can say what words sometimes can't. About how even in the most familiar relationships, there are still moments of uncertainty, vulnerability, and raw connection. The husband didn't mean to cross a line. But feelings are complicated. And even in love, misunderstandings happen. So what happens when a simple gesture stirs up more than comfort? When a wife isn't sure how to respond, not because she doesn't care, but because she's afraid of where it might lead. And when a husband realizes that even love needs constant understanding. Before we dive deeper into their journey, take a moment. Have you ever misread someone's touch? Or had your own misunderstood? Tell us in the comments. Vote in the poll. Can a hug mean more than just affection? Let's talk. This is just the beginning. She didn't pull away. But she didn't lean into him either. That small hesitation said more than she could ever put into words. He held the hug for just a second longer, then slowly let go, as if afraid he'd said too much without meaning to. She stayed quiet, still holding her hairbrush, eyes on the mirror but not really seeing herself. There was something heavy between them now, not anger, not even discomfort, but something that felt like a question neither of them knew how to ask. Dinner that night was quiet. The TV was on, but no one was watching. He scrolled through his phone just to avoid the silence, and she kept adjusting the cushions, like fixing the living room could fix the distance between them. This wasn't how things always were. There was a time they couldn't stop talking. A time when even their silences were comfortable. So what changed? He thought about the past year. Long work hours, missed date nights, quick I love yous sent by text instead of spoken with meaning. She had started sleeping on the far side of the bed. He noticed it, but never asked why. Maybe he was afraid of the answer. Maybe she didn't know it herself. All he knew was that tonight, when he reached out for a hug, it felt like knocking on a door that used to swing open without hesitation, but now, it barely moved. She, on the other hand, kept replaying that moment in her head. His hands, his quiet presence, the look in his eyes. It wasn't just a hug. She knew that. It was more. A silent need. A question. And the truth was, she missed him too. But she was tired. Not of him, but of being the one who always had to fix things. She wondered if he noticed the way she'd been holding herself back lately. If he saw the tears she hid when she stayed in the shower too long. She didn't want to push him away. But she wasn't ready to open up either. Now they were both waiting for the other to make a move, say something, explain what that hug meant or didn't mean. And in that quiet waiting, the space between them grew wider. Is it possible to love someone deeply and still feel miles apart? Can one quiet evening change everything? Let us know in the comments. Have you ever felt close and distant at the same time? Stay with us, the next moment may change their relationship forever. The next morning, the air in the house felt thick. She moved around the kitchen like everything was normal, eggs sizzling, kettle boiling, but the silence still clung to the walls. He came in quietly, already dressed for work, tie slightly crooked like he hadn't slept well. Their eyes met for a second. No words. Just a nod. Something in him wanted to stop, grab her hand, and talk. Really talk. But instead, he picked up his keys and said, "I'll be late tonight." She gave a small nod back. "Okay. Drive safe." That was it. That was the whole exchange. As the door closed behind him, she leaned on the counter, staring at the steam rising from her tea. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was something else, something like missing someone who's right there beside you. She wondered when exactly they stopped being best friends. Was it after her miscarriage last year? After he got promoted and started working weekends? Or maybe it was more recent, just a slow fading of effort, like watching color drain from a picture. Meanwhile, at work, he couldn't focus. His mind kept looping back to that hug. It wasn't even about the rejection. It was about everything left unsaid. He knew she was hurting. He just didn't know how to reach her anymore. Every time he tried, it felt like walking on eggshells. Maybe she was waiting for him to admit something, to acknowledge how distant he'd become. But how do you explain silence? How do you apologize for something you didn't even realize you were doing? Later that day, she got a message from an old friend, Sarah, someone she hadn't spoken to in months. They used to be close, before life got messy. Sarah asked if she wanted to meet up for coffee. Without thinking too much, she said yes. Maybe talking to someone outside the marriage would help her sort through her feelings. At the cafe, between small talk and coffee refills, Sarah asked, "Are you okay? You don't seem like you." That simple question broke something. The wife looked down and quietly said, "I don't know. I feel like I'm married to someone I don't know anymore. He's here, but I can't reach him." Back at home that night, he stood outside the house for a few minutes before going in. His phone buzzed with a message from someone unexpected, his coworker, Lena. She had noticed he'd been off lately and sent a casual "You okay?" He didn't reply. Not because he didn't want to, but because for a split second, he wondered what it meant that someone else had noticed before his wife said anything. Now, both of them were holding things they couldn't say. She, wondering if it was too late to fix what's broken. He, wondering if she even wanted him to try. So here's the question. What do you do when love still exists, but connection doesn't? Can you fight for something that feels faded, or is that just holding on to a memory? Drop your thoughts in the comments. What should they do next? Should she open up to him first, or should he make the move before someone else steps in? That night, the house felt colder than usual, though the heater hummed quietly in the background. He stepped in and saw her curled up on the couch, not asleep, just staring at the muted TV. She didn't look up when he walked in. He hung his coat slowly, like stalling for time, then walked over and sat on the edge of the couch, leaving a careful space between them. The silence stretched, long and uncomfortable. She finally asked, "Did you eat?" "Yeah," he replied. But he hadn't. The room was thick with unspoken words. She wanted to ask where he really was, why he looked like he'd been somewhere else entirely, mentally, emotionally. He wanted to ask who she met that day, what was really on her mind. But both of them just sat, waiting for the other to speak first. The quiet between them wasn't peaceful anymore, it was loaded. Tense. Fragile. He glanced at her hands resting on her lap. She used to hold his without even thinking. Now her fingers stayed locked together like she was holding something in. His chest tightened. He had so much to say, but it felt like the wrong words might break them entirely. So he asked softly, "Are we okay?" She turned slowly, eyes tired. "I don't know. Are we?" That question hit harder than any fight. Because it wasn't said in anger, it was said with uncertainty. That was worse. She wasn't accusing him. She was wondering if there was still something left to fight for. And that scared him more than any argument could. At that exact moment, his phone buzzed on the table. A message from Lena flashed on the screen. Just a short check-in. Hope your day got better. He reached for the phone quickly, silencing the screen before she could read it. But it was too late. She had seen the name. Her face didn't change, but her eyes did. He noticed. Still, she didn't ask. And that silence now felt like a test, one she was letting him decide whether to pass or fail. In the background, the TV played an old romantic drama. A couple argued, then kissed, like everything was simple. But in this room, nothing was simple. Can trust survive when doubt quietly slips in? Can one hug change everything, or was it the last attempt to save what's already slipping away? Tell us what you think in the comments. What would you do in this moment? Is it already too late, or is this the moment that changes everything? She didn't say anything about the message. She just stood up quietly and walked into the kitchen, leaving him sitting there with the weight of that moment pressing hard on his chest. He wanted to believe she hadn't seen the name, but he knew better. She had. And she didn't yell. She didn't ask questions. That scared him more than if she had screamed. He followed her a few minutes later. "It's nothing," he said, his voice low. "She's just a coworker. She knows I've been off lately." She didn't turn around. She was rinsing a cup in the sink, but the water had been off for a while. She was just standing there, holding the cup under an empty stream. "I didn't ask," she said. Her voice was calm, too calm. "You can talk to whoever you want." "No," he said quickly. "I don't want it to be like that between us." She turned now, eyes locked on his. "Then what is it between us?" Before he could answer, her phone buzzed this time. She hesitated. He glanced down. It was Sarah. She picked it up without looking at him and walked into the other room. That's when his thoughts started spinning. Had she said something about him to Sarah? Were they talking about them? Was someone else seeing parts of their marriage that he couldn't even face? Then the twist hit him. He remembered the anniversary. Not the wedding one. The due date. The baby they had lost. It was tomorrow. She hadn't brought it up. Neither had he. Maybe that's what all this was really about. All that grief packed into silence. All the guilt, the anger, the sadness buried so deep it was starting to come out in strange ways. Through hugs that felt heavier than expected. Through silence that screamed. Through messages from other people. She came back and sat down, eyes still unreadable. "I'm meeting Sarah again tomorrow," she said quietly. He nodded. "Okay." She asked if I'm happy. He looked at her. "What did you say?" She paused. "I said, I don't know." That moment broke something open in him. Not because she doubted their happiness, but because for the first time, she said it out loud. The air in the room changed again. He realized now that this wasn't about one hug. It wasn't about a message. It was about everything they had pushed aside, hoping it would fix itself. But nothing fixes itself. Not grief. Not distance. Not love. So here's where the stakes are real. She's not angry. She's unsure. And when someone's unsure, That's the most dangerous place to be in love. Because that's when people start to drift. If you were in her place, what would you do? And if you were him, would you fight harder, or give her the space she thinks she needs? Drop your answers in the comments. Your thoughts might help them see what they can't. The next evening, she didn't go to meet Sarah. Instead, she stayed home, sitting by the window with a blanket wrapped around her legs. He walked in, surprised to see her there. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then, almost like it had been waiting to come out all along, she said, "I remembered what tomorrow is." He froze. She didn't have to say more. "I didn't forget," he said softly. "I just didn't know how to bring it up." Tears welled in her eyes. "We never talked about it. We just moved on. Or tried to." He walked closer, slowly, unsure if he should sit. "I thought I was protecting you," he said. "But maybe I was just avoiding my own pain." "You weren't the only one," she whispered. They sat there together, the room quiet except for the wind outside. This time, when he reached for her hand, she didn't pull away. Her fingers wrapped around his like they used to. The hug he gave her that night wasn't asking for anything, it was just an apology. And a promise. No words. Just presence. But then, as they sat in that fragile peace, her phone lit up again. This time, it wasn't Sarah. He looked down. She looked too. The message was short. Just a name and a question, still thinking about it, from a number saved under initials RS. He blinked. "Who's that?" She stared at it, lips parted, unsure whether to lie or explain. And in that hesitation, the silence said more than anything. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't pull away. He just asked again, quieter, "Are you thinking about something else?" And now, for the first time, it was her who looked scared. "I don't know," she said again, but this time, it didn't sound unsure. It sounded honest. Tired. Real. He stood up slowly. "Maybe we both need to stop pretending we're okay." The ending wasn't dramatic. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just two people sitting in the truth, finally, after months of quiet pain. So the twist wasn't betrayal. It wasn't another person. It was this: sometimes love doesn't die with a bang, but with silence, distraction, and time. Now it's your turn. What should they do? Rebuild? Walk away? Or is there still something left worth saving? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Real stories have no perfect endings, just honest ones. He didn't sleep on the couch that night, and she didn't sleep much at all. They shared a bed, but the space between them said everything. Not anger, not blame, just distance still learning how to shrink. In the morning, there were no long speeches. No dramatic gestures. Just 2 cups of coffee, set quietly on the table. He spoke first. "Do you want to talk about it?" She nodded. But not all at once. And that's how it started, small, quiet steps toward healing. They didn't pretend to fix everything overnight. But they started showing up. For each other. For themselves. He deleted Lena's number not because she asked, but because he knew he had to draw a line. She blocked RS not to punish, but to protect what still had a chance. They went to therapy. Together. He thought it might be awkward, but it turned out to be the first space where they could say things that had lived too long in silence. They talked about the baby, finally. They cried. They forgave. Not just each other, but themselves. Their routines changed, slowly. She started painting again. He took weekends off, even if work piled up. They began having coffee on the porch, not scrolling through their phones. Sometimes they just sat in silence, but this time it felt safe, not empty. Months passed. The pain didn't disappear, but it stopped being the center of their story. Instead, what stayed was a quiet kind of love, one that had been tested, shaken, and still chose to stay. So no, it wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better, real. And maybe the lesson isn't about one hug or one message. Maybe it's about the little things that build or break a relationship over time. The missed moments. The unsaid words. The simple act of choosing to stay again and again even when it's hard. What do you think? Was this the right ending? Would you have made different choices in their place? Tell us in the comments. Your perspective matters more than you think. And if you'd want to see a sequel to this story, let us know.